Cahokia, Illinois. Year 1050. A woman lies naked on a plaza before 10,000 witnesses. She's not a sacrifice. Around her, dancers wearing carved wooden phalluses move in precise formation. This isn't a secret ceremony. It's happening in broad daylight at the largest city north of Mexico. Archaeologists found the stage. They found the artifacts. They found evidence this happened for generations. The question nobody wants to ask: what kind of power structure requires public sex rituals to function? According to excavations led by the Illinois State Archaeological Survey and analyzed in peer-reviewed publications by Dr. Thomas Emerson and Dr. Kristen Hedman, Cahokia operated under a theocratic system where fertility, human, agricultural, cosmic wasn't metaphorical. It was policy. How archaeologists proved these weren't rare events, but institutional requirements, and the disturbing evidence that participation wasn't always voluntary. The artifacts are real. The human remains don't lie. Let's go. Cahokia reaches its peak population around 1100 CE. Conservative estimates put it at 15,000 people. Some archaeologists argue 20,000. That makes it larger than London at the same time. The city covers 6 square miles. At its center, Monk's Mound, a terraced earthwork that rises 10 stories and contains 22 million cubic feet of soil. Every basket of that dirt was carried by hand. But Monk's Mound isn't the control center for sex rituals. That's happening 400 yards south at a structure archaeologists now call the Sub-Mound 51 borrow pit. Excavations between 2005 and 2010 revealed a prepared surface, post holes arranged in circles, and something unexpected: carved red cedar posts shaped like explicit human genitalia. Not stylized. Anatomically detailed, Dr. Emerson's team found them in ritual contexts alongside marine shell beads. They're dance props. Wear patterns on the bases show they were gripped and moved. Microscopic analysis reveals residue consistent with pigments and possibly plant-based lubricants. The wood was harvested specifically for these objects, worked with stone tools to achieve rounded, smooth surfaces. Someone spent hours carving each one. Multiple someones because the archaeologists found dozens. Then there's the iconography. Cahokia's elite commissioned engravings on marine shell gorgets throat ornaments imported from the Gulf Coast. Several examples show explicit imagery: figures in sexual positions, exaggerated genitalia, women with swollen bellies. One gorget, catalogued as the Berger figurine, depicts a woman with serpent imagery emerging from her womb. This isn't pornography, it's theology. The physical evidence gets more specific in 2016, when bioarchaeologist Kristen Hedman publishes her analysis of Mound 72. This burial mound, excavated in the 1960s and 70s, contains over 270 bodies. In one pit, 53 young women, aged 15 to 30, buried simultaneously. Their bodies show no signs of violent trauma. Isotope analysis of their teeth reveals they didn't grow up in Cahokia. They came from elsewhere. Next to them, 4 men with their heads and hands removed. Nearby, a male buried on a platform of 20,000 shell beads arranged in the shape of a bird. Falcon imagery dominates Cahokia's elite symbolism. This man was someone. Around him, more bodies, including another group of young women, these with evidence of being bound at the wrists. Hedman's work reveals a pattern. The women buried in mass at Mound 72 came from outside Cahokia's immediate region, but shared dietary signatures with each other. They arrived together. They died together. The burial happened around 1000 CE, during Cahokia's explosive growth phase. Traditional interpretations called them sacrifices, but that word does heavy lifting. It implies they volunteered or were chosen randomly. The evidence suggests something more organized. Now connect this to the sex rituals. Cahokia's elite didn't just control food distribution and labor. They controlled reproduction. The carved phalluses, the fertility gorgets, The public plazas designed for mass gatherings. These aren't separate from the mass burials. They're part of the same system. A 2018 study by Birch and colleagues used Bayesian modeling to track Cahokia's population boom. The city didn't grow through natural birth rates. It grew through immigration. People were being drawn in or brought in from hundreds of miles away. The question becomes, what were they promised? And what were they required to do when they arrived? Ethnographic comparisons to other Mississippian cultures provide clues. The Natchez people, documented by French colonists in the 1700s, maintained a rigid caste system where the ruling class, called sons, married commoners in asymmetrical unions. Commoner women who bore children to son men gained status. Their children entered the nobility, but commoner men who married son women saw their children demoted. Reproductive access was the entire political structure. Cahokia predates the Natchez by centuries, but the Mississippian cultural complex shares iconography, mound-building techniques, and cosmological frameworks across time and space. If later Mississippian societies structured power through controlled sexuality, the archaeological evidence suggests Cahokia did too, just at a far larger scale. But a newly declassified report complicates this. Not declassified from government secrecy, but from academic obscurity. In 1972, archaeologist Melvin Fowler noted something during the Mound 72 excavations that didn't make it into popular accounts. Several of the mass-buried women showed skeletal indicators of having given birth. They weren't virgins selected for sacrifice. They were mothers. The human cost becomes visible in the bones. Bioarchaeological analysis from the East St. Louis precinct and the Cahokia mounds themselves shows patterns of nutritional stress, particularly among young women. Linear enamel hypoplasias, lines on teeth, indicating periods of starvation or disease during childhood, appear more frequently in female remains than male. Healed fractures suggest physical labor or violence. Pelvic scoring indicates multiple pregnancies. One burial, catalogued as feature 229, contained a woman in her early 20s, buried with a carved figurine depicting a woman with a distended belly and prominent vulva. The figurine was placed on her pelvis. She died with the figurine that symbolized her function. We don't know what she was thinking, but we do know what happened to her body after death. It was placed in a prepared pit, covered with specific soil, and surrounded by broken pottery that had contained food. Someone mourned her. Even in death, her identity was tied to her womb. The public rituals weren't just symbolic reinforcement, they were recruitment. Excavations at the Grand Plaza, a 50-acre open space, capable of holding the entire population, revealed evidence of repeated large-scale gatherings. Soil chemistry shows residue from fires, feasting, and possibly fermented beverages made from corn. These weren't somber religious services. They were spectacles. And the spectacles included sex. The carved phalluses weren't hidden in temples. They were used in the plaza, suggesting the imagery was everywhere. Children grew up seeing it. It was normalized. But normalization serves power. If the ruling class controls access to the divine, and the divine is expressed through fertility, then sexual performance becomes religious duty. Refusal isn't just social deviance. It's cosmic treason. The Natchez analogy becomes darker here. Others were volunteered by their families, who gained status from the sacrifice. The system created incentives for people to offer up their own relatives. Did Cahokia operate the same way? The mass burials suggest yes. The 53 women in Mound 72 weren't randomly killed. Their bodies were arranged with care. Some were layered neatly. Others showed signs of having been placed while still pliable, meaning they died close to the burial time, possibly in sequence. If they were strangled or poisoned as part of a ceremony, the sediment wouldn't preserve evidence of soft tissue trauma. Lived there long enough to integrate into the diet, and then died together in a planned event. For decades, the official story was that Cahokia collapsed around 1350 CE due to environmental degradation. People left for greener pastures. Collapse was ecological. A team led by Caitlin Rankin published soil core analysis from Horseshoe Lake, adjacent to Cahokia. They found evidence of massive deforestation, yes, but also something else. 1200 CE, a century and a half before the traditional collapse date. The city didn't gradually decline. It hemorrhaged people in a single generation. Why? The environmental stressors were real, but they don't explain why people didn't just migrate temporarily and return. Something broke the system. The truth was hiding in plain sight. The fertility cult required constant growth. The mass rituals, the public performances, the importation of young women, all of it only works if the city is expanding. If population is booming, the rituals prove the gods are pleased. If population stalls, the rituals become proof the gods are angry. And if the gods are angry, the solution is more rituals, more offerings, more bodies. Except you can't sacrifice your way out of an ecological crisis. Cahokia's rulers doubled down on the very system that required unsustainable growth. They demanded more. And people left. Not because the land gave out, but because the cost of staying became unbearable. The immigrants who'd been drawn to Cahokia with promises of prosperity and divine favor realized the system was feeding on them. The surrounding communities who'd been supplying tribute, and people saw the center weakening. They stopped sending both. By 1200, Cahokia enters a death spiral. By 1350, it's effectively abandoned. The mounds remain, the plazas grow over. The wooden phalluses rot into the soil. When Europeans encounter Mississippian cultures in the 1500s and 1600s, they report widespread fertility rituals, explicit iconography, and social systems structured around reproductive control. The Natchez, the Caddo, the Coosa, all of them maintain versions of what Cahokia pioneered. The system that destroyed Cahokia survived Cahokia. It spread, it adapted. It became woven into the fabric of Mississippian culture so deeply that even the collapse of the largest city in North America couldn't kill it. The site goes silent for 400 years. Local tribes, Osage, Illini, Kickapoo, know the mounds exist but don't claim them. French colonists in the 1600s assumed they're natural hills. American settlers in the 1800s call them Indian mounds, but have no idea of their scale or purpose. Monk's Mound gets its name because French. Trappist monks build a monastery on top in 1809. They have no idea they're living on a pyramid. What remains becomes a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 1982, but the damage is done. The Osage have stories of ancient cities and powerful priests, but the connections are ambiguous. The collapse was so complete, even memory collapsed. What survived is the archaeological record, and it keeps yielding secrets. In 2021, researchers using ground-penetrating radar discovered more post circles beneath the Grand Plaza, the same patterns, the same ritual architecture. They estimate only 15% of Cahokia has been excavated. The rest remains underground, waiting. The academic debate now focuses on consent and agency. Were the women in Mound 72 victims or participants? Did they believe in the system that killed them? The bones can't answer. The artifacts can't answer. We project modern frameworks onto ancient choices and call it interpretation. But one thing is certain. Cahokia's elite built a civilization on the commodification of fertility. They created a theological system that turned bodies, especially female bodies, into political currency. And when the system demanded more than the population could provide, the entire structure collapsed. Here's what keeps archaeologists awake. The carved phalluses from Sub-Mound 51 were deliberately buried. Someone took them apart, dug pits, and carefully interred them with layers of ritually broken pottery and burnt offerings. This happened around 1200 CE, right when the population crashed. Someone was ending the rituals, or hiding them, or preserving them. The last one was found in 2010. It's in a climate-controlled archive now, catalogued and photographed. You can request to see it if you're a researcher. You can hold it. You can see where hands gripped it 800 years ago during performances we can only reconstruct from dirt and bone. The sources are in the description. Fact check me. This is Blood and Empire. We'll see you in the next one.